theory. Mike Devine had taken voluntary retirement about a month after the kidnapping. Because he was still in his mid-40s, I assumed he'd been pushed out of his job. We talked for a couple of hours out on his stone terrace overlooking the Potomac. It was a tasteful, well-appointed apartment for a now single man. Devine was tan and looked rested. He was one of the better advertisements I'd seen for getting out of police work while you can. He reminded me a little of Travis McGee in the John McDonnell novels. He was well-built, with lots of character in his face. He'd do well in early retirement land, I thought. Movie hero good looks, lots of curly brown hair, an easy smile, stories galore. My partner and I were pushed out, you know, Devine confessed over a couple of Corona beers. One fuck-up that happened to turn into World War III, and we were both history at the service. We didn't get a lot of support from our boss, either. It was a public case. I guess there had to be heroes and villains. I could be as philosophical as the next guy over a cold beer. Maybe it's all for the best, Mike Devine mused. You ever think about starting over? Doing something else while you still have the energy? Before the Alzheimer's sets in? I've thought about private practice, I said to Devine. I'm a psychologist. I still do some pro bono work in the projects. But you love the job too much to leave it? Mike Devine grinned and squinted into late afternoon sunlight coming off the water. Gray seabirds with white chests flew right by the terrace. Nice. Everything about the layout was nice. Listen, Mike, I wanted to go over once more those last couple of days before the kidnapping, I said to him. You are goddamn hooked, Alex. I've been over every square inch of that territory myself. Believe me, there's nothing there. It's fallow ground. Nothing grows. I've tried and tried, and finally I gave up the ghost. I believe you, but I'm still curious about a late-model sedan that might have been seen out in Potomac. Possibly a Dodge, I said. It was the car that Nina Saraiya remembered parked on Langley Terrace. You ever notice a blue or black sedan parked on Sorrel Avenue or anywhere around the day school? Like I said, I've been over and over all of our daily logs. There wasn't any mystery car. You can look at the logs yourself. I have, I told him and laughed at the seeming hopelessness of my case. Mike Devine and I talked for a while more. He couldn't come up with anything new. In the end, I listened to him praise the beach life, bone fishing on the Keys, hitting the little white ball. His new life was just starting. He'd gotten over the Dunn-Goldberg kidnapping a lot better than I had. Something still bothered me, though. The whole accomplice thing. Or the watcher thing. More than that, I had a gut feeling about Devine and his partner. A bad feeling. Something told me they knew more than they were willing to tell anybody. While I was still as hot as a $10 pistol, I decided to contact Devine's ex-partner, Charles Chakley, later that same night. After his dismissal, Chakley and his family had settled in Tempe, Arizona. It was midnight my time, 10 o'clock in Tempe. Not too late, I figured. Charles Chakley? This is Detective Alex Cross calling from Washington, I said when he got on the phone. There was a pause, an uncomfortable silence before he answered. Then Chakley got hostile. Real strange, it seemed to me. His reaction only served to fuel my instincts about him and his partner. What the hell do you want? He bristled. Why are you calling me here? I'm retired from the service now. I'm trying to put what happened behind me. Leave me the hell alone. Stay away from me and my family. Listen, I'm sorry to bother you, I started to apologize. He cut me off. Then don't. That's an easy fix, Cross. Butt out of my life. I could just about picture Charles Chakley as I spoke to him. I remembered him from the days right after the kidnapping. He was only 51, but he looked over 60. Beer belly, most of his hair gone, sad, kind of withdrawn eyes. Chakley was physical evidence of the harm the job could do to you if you let it. Unfortunately, I'm still assigned to a couple of murders, I said to him, hoping he'd understand. They involved Gary Sinigi Murphy, too. He came back to kill one of the teachers at the school. Vivian Kim? I thought you didn't want to bother me. Why don't you pretend you never called, huh? Then I'll pretend I never picked up the phone. I'm getting good at playing let's pretend out here on the painted desert. Listen, I could get a subpoena. You know I can do that. We could have this conversation in Washington. Or I could fly out there and come over to your house in Tempe. Show up for a barbecue some night. Hey, what the fuck's the matter with you? What's with you, Cross? The goddamn case is over. Leave it alone, and leave me the fuck alone. There was something very strange in Chakley's tone. He sounded ready to explode. I talked to your partner tonight, I said. That kept him on the line. So, you talked to Mickey Devine. I talk to him myself now and then. I'm happy for both of you. I'll even get out of your hair in a minute. Just answer a question or two. One question. That's it, Chakley finally said. Do you remember seeing a dark, late-model sedan parked on Sorrel Avenue, anywhere around the Goldberg or Dunn house? Maybe a week or so prior to the kidnapping? Hell no. Christ no. Anything out of the ordinary would have gone in our log. The kidnapping case is closed. It's over in my book. So are you, Detective Cross. Chakley hung up on me. The tone of the conversation had been too weird. The unsolved Watcher angle was driving me a little crazy. It was a big, loose end. Too important to ignore if you were any kind of detective. I had to talk to Jesse about Mike Devine and Charlie Chakley, and the logs they had kept. Something wasn't checking out about the two of them. They were definitely holding back. Chapter 72. Jessie and I spent the day at her lake cottage. She needed to talk. She needed to tell me how she had changed, what she'd found out about herself on her sabbatical. Two very, very strange things happened down there in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina. We left Washington at 5 in the morning and got to the lake just before 8:30. It was the 3rd of December, but it could have been the 1st of October. The temperature was in the 70s all afternoon, and there was a sweet mountain breeze. The chirp and warble of dozens of different birds filled the air. The summer people were gone for the season, so we had the lake to ourselves. A single speedboat swooped around the lake for an hour or so, its big engine sounding like a race car from NASCAR. Otherwise, it was just the two of us. By mutual agreement, we didn't push into any heavy subjects too quickly. Not about Jesse, or Devine and Chakley, or my latest theories on the kidnapping. Late in the afternoon, Jesse and I went for a long trek into the surrounding pine forests. We followed the spoor of a perfectly crystalline stream that climbed into the surrounding mountain range. Jessie wore no makeup, and her hair was loose and wild. She was in jean cutoffs, and a University of Virginia sweatshirt missing the sleeves. Her eyes were a beautiful blue that rivaled the color of the sky. I told you that I found out a lot about myself down here, Alex, Jessie said as we hiked deeper and deeper into the forest. She was talking softly. She seemed almost childlike. I listened carefully to every word. I wanted to know all about Jessie. I want to tell you about me. "I'm ready to talk now," she said. "I need to tell you why and how and everything else." I nodded and let her go on. My father was a failure. In his eyes, he was street smart. He could get along so beautifully socially when he wanted to. But he came from the shanty side, and he let it put a huge chip on his shoulder. My father's negative attitude got him in trouble all the time. He didn't care how it affected my mother or me. He got to be a heavy drinker in his 40s and 50s. At the end of his life, he didn't have one friend, or really any family. I imagine that's why he killed himself. My father killed himself, Alex. He did it in his unmarked car. There wasn't any heart attack in Union Station. That's a lie I've been telling ever since my college days. We were both silent as we walked on. Jessie had only talked about her mother and father once or twice. I'd known about their drinking problem, but I wouldn't push her, especially because I couldn't be Jessie's doctor. When she was ready, I'd thought that she would talk about it. I didn't want to be a failure like my father or my mother. That's the way they saw themselves, Alex. That's how they talked all the time. Not low esteem. No esteem. I couldn't let myself be like that. How do you see them? As failures, I guess. A tiny smile came with the admission. A painfully honest smile. They were both so unbelievably smart, Alex. They knew everything about everything. They read every book in the universe. They could talk to you about any subject. Have you ever been to Ireland? I've been to England once, on police business. That's the one and only time I've been to Europe. Never had the money to spare. Some villages you go to in Ireland, the people are so articulate, but they live in such poverty. You see these white ghettos. Every third storefront seems to be a pub. There are so many educated failures in that country. I didn't want to be another smart failure. I've told you about that fear of mine. That would be hell on earth to me. I pushed myself so hard in school. I needed to be number one, no matter what the cost. Then, in the Treasury Department, I got ahead, comfortably ahead. Alex, for whatever reasons, I was becoming happy with my career, with my life in general. But it disintegrated after the Goldberg-Dunn kidnapping. You were the scapegoat. You weren't the golden girl anymore. Just like that, I was finished. Agents were talking behind my back. Eventually, I quit, left the service. I didn't have a choice. It was total bullshit and unfair. I came down here to figure out who the hell I was. I needed to do it all by myself. Jessie reached out, and she put her arms around me in the heart of the woods. She began to sob very quietly. I had never seen her cry before. I held Jessie tightly in my arms. I'd never felt so close to her before. I knew she was telling me some hard truths. I owed her some hard truth in return. We were down in a secluded knoll, talking quietly, when I became aware of someone watching us in the woods. I kept my head rock steady, but my eyes darted to the right. Somebody else was in the woods. Someone was watching us. Another watcher. Somebody's up there, Jessie. Just beyond that hill to our right, I whispered to her. She didn't look in that direction. She was still a cop. Are you sure, Alex? She asked. I'm sure. Trust me on this one. Let's split up, I said. If whoever it is starts to take off, we run them down. We separated, and walked so that we'd flank the hill where I'd seen the watcher.